Hello and welcome to LearnPythonTutorial.com and the final Python variables tutorial. And we're going to talk about Python garbage collection and how it works. Garbage collection is the way Python manages its memory automatically. And it does this based off the reference counter. We've talked about a reference counter before. Reference counter, anytime it has a reference, it counts up. When a reference is removed, it counts down. When the reference hits 0, garbage collection kicks in and removes that object from the memory. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to open my Python interpreter and we're going to do b equals 9. So what happened here? We got b is referencing 9. 9 is an object with a value of 9, and we discussed objects are memory. So what's going on here? So when b references 9, the reference counter goes up 1. So the reference counter in this case is 1. Now if we go b equals 7, now the reference counter for the object containing the value 9 is 0. Garbage collection kicks in, removes that object, so that memory is freed up. Now the object containing the value 7, the reference counter on that one is 1. So now we have an object with a reference counter of 1. So that one's basically active. Now if we go b is equal to 9 again, b is now pointing to the object containing the value 9 with a reference counter of 1. Now 7, that object has a value of 7, but the reference counter is 0, so Python's garbage collection has removed that object. It no longer exists in the memory. But there's times that this will not work. And when this happens, it's called a reference cycle. And what happens is a object is referencing itself. So let's do a is equal to an empty list, and then a append. Append means we're going to add something to that list. A. So we're going to add another empty list to this object. So what's going on here? If we call A, we'll see there's two lists here. Alright, A, we create an empty list. Then we appended that list to itself in the object. So in the object we got a list. And then that inside that object the list is getting called again. So the reference counter goes up to 1. But we're no longer using A. Our program doesn't call it anymore. So, but the reference counter is at 1. So Python has a way to remove reference cycles, and it doesn't do it immediately. It does it after so many occurrences of references referencing something and then not referencing something, and that's an occurrence. So in this case, after so many occurrences, Python will run its garbage collection, and it will go into the memory and look at every object. When it goes into memory and looks at every object, it's going to see that this one's referencing itself, and our program no longer calls it, but it has a reference counter of 1, but nothing's calling it, so it's going to go ahead and remove that. So how do we know what when the garbage collection, sorry, there's a brain fart there, the garbage collection is going to run? Well, we can look at that by using a module called garbage collection. Now, we're not going to dig deep into the garbage collection module here, because this is just, this is based off variables, and I want you to understand how the garbage collection goes in and removes basic memory and frees up basic memory. We will dig deep when we get the modules into the garbage collection, because there's a lot of things we can do. We can manually control our garbage collection. It's not preferred to do that, but if you have to speed up your program, then you can do it. Alright. So what we do is we import the garbage collection module, and we do that by type in import gc, hit return, and we import gc. Now we want to get the threshold. We want to know when Python's going to run its garbage collection that's going to go ahead and catch these reference cycles. So we can pull that information up by going gc get underscore threshold parentheses and return. Alright, So what we did here is we ran a function that said, let me know when the garbage collection is going to run and catch my reference cycles. So what it says here is 700. So 700 occurrences. Then Python will run and go ahead and collect these reference cycles. So 700 times that I reference an object and then I dereference an object, it's going to count that. So when we hit 700, Python's going to go ahead and run its garbage collection to catch reference cycles. This might be a little bit over your head right now since we're, basically just covering variables. But in the future, it's good to know that you can control the garbage collection. We will get into that when we get to modules. But for now, just know after 700 occurrences, Python will run a script or an algorithm that will go through and clean up your memory. When the reference counter gets to 0, it automatically does it. But when you have a reference counter stuck at 1 because you have a reference cycle, then 700 occurrences, Python will run its garbage collection to catch those. We can change this by using the module. Like I said, we're not going to cover that, but just be aware you can change when it runs this. And you can actually turn off garbage collection. You can turn it on. There's so much you can do with the module. So when we get there, you'll see how much we can do with it. But for now, just know that Python does a very good job of managing our memory. One other thing I want to point out is if your memory is close to being full and used up, garbage collection will not run. It takes memory for garbage collection to run. So say your program is very large and it's using up a lot of memory and there's not enough to run garbage collection, then you're going to get a bunch of exceptions and you're going to have a bunch of issues. So just be aware if you're having a lot of issues like that, that you might manually have to go ahead and use the module to run this a little bit earlier in your program. So that's a little bit over our heads right now, and we'll talk about that later. But if you have any questions, please leave a comment on YouTube or on our website at learnpythontutorial.com. We will be jumping into numbers in the next set of tutorials. We'll be working with math and everything else that comes with numbers. So don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.